Hello everyone. Today's story is about a daughter who was always treated like she didn't belong, no matter how hard she tried. What happens when the same family that mocked her suddenly needs something she owns, and thinks she'll stay silent again? Let's step into this quiet, powerful story of betrayal, and the moment everything finally turns. Sign it or don't bother coming back again. The words echoed in my head before I even opened the envelope, like the paper already knew what it carried. My name is Alara Whitmore. I'm 32. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family, just for asking why you mattered less? The courier had already walked away. I stood there in the doorway holding the envelope like it might burn me. The house behind me was quiet, too quiet. Even the clock on the wall sounded louder than usual, ticking like it was counting something down. I slid my finger under the seal. Legal language. Precise. My father's name. My mother's signature. And a demand. I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Just air leaving my lungs in a way that felt unfamiliar. 3 years. 3 years of being the difficult daughter. 3 years of watching my sister smile through everything she was handed while I learned to stay silent just to keep the peace. A mirror across the room caught my reflection. I looked calm. Too calm. The chair by the window looked like it was waiting for me. I sat down slowly, reading every line again. They weren't asking. They were taking. And somehow, they had finally given me something in return. Clarity. The paper didn't shake in my hands. That was the first thing I noticed. I should have been angry. Or hurt. Or at least confused. I was steady. Like something inside me had already crossed a line I didn't even remember approaching. I read the heading again. Property Transfer Agreement. My name sat there in bold. Beneath it, details I had never seen before. A property address. A trust reference. Legal language wrapped around something that clearly didn't belong to them alone. A house. Not theirs. Not my sister's. If it had been. A slow breath filled my chest. I leaned back, the chair creaking softly under me like it understood before I did. They really thought I wouldn't read it, I whispered. My phone buzzed on the table. I stared at the screen as it rang. Once. Twice. I didn't pick up. The silence that followed felt heavier than the call itself. Another buzz. A message this time. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just sign it. I smiled small and tight. There was again that tone. Not a request. Not even a conversation. A command. Another message came in before I could move. Your sister needs this settled before the wedding. Of course she did. The room felt colder somehow. The air thinner. I looked back at the document, at the signatures already printed at the bottom, so confident, so certain I would fall in line like I always had. My fingers traced the edge of the paper. They didn't know. Not yet. But they had just turned something quiet into something irreversible. I folded the document carefully. Not out of respect, but precision. The edges aligned perfectly as I placed it back into the envelope. My reflection in the window stared back at me again, softer now but sharper too. Like something had finally clicked into place behind my eyes. A house. They had hidden a house from me. I stood up slowly, walking toward the kitchen. The floor beneath my feet felt colder than usual, each step echoing faintly through the empty space. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't my mother. It was my sister. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Hey, she said lightly, like we were still those girls sharing a bedroom. Did Mom tell you about the paperwork? I leaned against the counter, fingers resting on the marble surface. She mentioned something, I replied. A small pause. Then a laugh. Soft. Polished. You know how these things work. It's just easier if everything stays centralized. Centralized. I closed my eyes for a second. You mean under your name? I asked quietly. Another pause. Longer this time. Don't make it weird, Alara. There was. Not denial. Just dismissal. I opened my eyes and stared at the envelope sitting across the room like it was listening. How long did you know? I asked. Her voice shifted just slightly. It's complicated. No, it wasn't. 3 years of silence suddenly made sense. Every smirk. Every joke at family dinners. Every time my name became something lighter, easier to ignore. They hadn't just excluded me. They had erased me. My grip tightened against the counter. But my voice stayed calm. I'll think about it, I said. And before she could respond, I ended the call. The silence that followed didn't feel empty anymore. It felt controlled. Like for the first time, I was the one holding something they needed. I didn't sleep that night. The envelope stayed on the table untouched, like it had weight beyond paper. Every time I passed it, I felt it watching me, quiet, patient. By morning, the light coming through the window felt different. Sharper. Honest. I made coffee and sat down across from it again. I noticed the fine print. Not just a property. A trust. My name listed as a beneficiary. Primary, not secondary. The date caught my attention. Years ago. Long before my sister's engagement. Long before the difficult daughter label started sticking to me like something permanent. I leaned closer. A name appeared in the document I hadn't seen before. Eleanor Whitmore. My grandmother. The cup in my hand paused midair. She had always been quiet. The only one who never laughed when my mother made those cutting comments. The only one who slipped me small, folded notes at family dinners. I remembered one clearly. Not everything that belongs to you will be given willingly. My fingers tightened around the paper. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't new. They had known. A sudden knock broke the silence. I froze. Another knock, firmer this time. I stood up slowly, my heart steady but alert, and walked toward the door. When I opened it, my father stood there. Same posture. Same controlled expression. But this time, he wasn't smiling. "Have you signed it?" he asked flatly. No greeting. No warmth. Just expectation. I stepped aside slightly, letting the silence stretch between us. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I looked at him, really looked. Then I said calm and clear, "I think we need to talk about what you tried to take from me." His jaw tightened. Just slightly. And in that tiny shift, I saw it. They weren't as certain anymore. My father stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. His shoes echoed against the floor, slow and deliberate. I closed the door behind him, the soft click sounding louder than it should have. "You're overthinking this," he said, glancing at the envelope on the table. "It's just paperwork. Just paperwork." I walked past him, taking my seat again, the same chair that had been waiting for me all night. "Then you won't mind explaining it," I replied. He didn't sit. That was new. He always sat. Always made himself comfortable, like every space belonged to him. Now he just stood there, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like he was looking for something that had moved. "It's a family arrangement," he said finally. "Your sister's future needs stability." I let the silence stretch. Then, what about mine? The question hung between us, heavier than anything else in the room. He exhaled sharply, a hint of impatience slipping through. "You made your choices, Elara." There was the quiet rewriting of history. My fingers brushed the edge of the document again. "So this was mine," I said, tapping the paper lightly. "And you decided, what?" "That I didn't deserve to know." His jaw tightened again. "It was never meant to be a complication." A complication. I almost smiled. Across the room, the mirror caught us both, him standing rigid, me seated still. For the first time, it didn't look like he was in control. "I spoke to a lawyer this morning," I said softly. That wasn't entirely true. Not yet. But the way his eyes shifted, that was real. "And," he asked too quickly. I leaned back slightly, folding my hands in my lap. "And I learned something interesting," I continued. The air changed. Subtle. But undeniable. "This isn't just a house," I said. "It's protected. Legally." He didn't respond. Didn't move. But the silence this time wasn't his. It was mine. And I was holding it. The silence stretched, thin, fragile. My father finally moved, pulling out a chair across from me. The sound scraped lightly against the floor, controlled but not as confident as before. "What exactly are you implying?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for the envelope, sliding the document out again with slow, deliberate care. The paper whispered as it moved, a quiet sound that somehow filled the room. "I'm not implying anything," I said calmly. "I'm reading what's already written." His eyes followed every movement of my hands. I turned the page slightly, tapping a section near the bottom. "There's a clause here," I continued. "A restriction." He didn't react. But I noticed his fingers, just slightly, tightening against the edge of the table. The property can't be transferred without my full informed consent, I said. Not assumed. Not pressured. The word pressured lingered. Heavy. Deliberate. A faint sound came from his throat, almost a laugh but not quite. You're making this dramatic, he said. It's still within the family. I looked up at him. Was I ever included in that? The question landed clean. No emotion. No hesitation. Just truth. For a moment neither of us spoke. The room felt still, like even the air was waiting to see who would move first. Then, his phone buzzed. He glanced down. My sister's name lit up the screen. He hesitated, then declined the call. That was when I understood. This wasn't just about control. This was about urgency. Something they needed, quickly. I leaned back slightly, folding the document again. You didn't come here to explain, I said softly. You came to make sure I hadn't figured it out yet. His eyes snapped back to mine. And there was not anger. Not authority. Just a flicker of something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. For 3 years they had controlled the story. Labeled me. Silenced me. Turned me into something easy to dismiss. But now, the story had shifted. And they could feel it. I placed the envelope back on the table. Gently. I'm not signing anything, I said. The words didn't echo. They settled. Permanent. And for the first time, he didn't argue. He just stared at me. Like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. He stood there for a long moment, then slowly pushed his chair back. The legs scraped against the floor again, but this time the sound wasn't controlled. It dragged. Uneven. You're making a mistake, he said. I didn't respond. The silence between us had changed shape. It wasn't tense anymore. It was final. He reached for the envelope, his fingers brushing against it, but I placed my hand over it first. A small movement. Barely noticeable. But it stopped him. This doesn't leave with you, I said quietly. His eyes flickered to my hand, then back to my face. For a second I thought he might argue. Push. Raise his voice like he used to when I was younger, when volume was enough to end every conversation. But he didn't. Instead he straightened, adjusting his jacket like he was stepping back into a role that no longer fit. You've already caused enough damage in this family, he said, his voice colder now. Don't make it worse. Damage. The word lingered in the air. I almost asked him what exactly I had broken. But I already knew the answer. Their version of control. Their quiet system where I stayed small, and my sister stayed favored. My phone buzzed again on the table. This time I didn't have to look. I knew it was her. The wedding was close. The timeline was tight. Everything they had planned depended on me staying silent just a little longer. I picked up the phone, glanced at the screen. 5 missed calls. A new message. Why are you doing this? You're embarrassing us. I let out a soft breath. Embarrassing them. Not hurting me. Not lying to me. Just embarrassing them. I set the phone down without replying. Then I looked back at my father. You told everyone I cut you off for no reason, I said calmly. He didn't answer. Maybe it's time they hear the real one. The shift was immediate. Subtle but sharp. Not anger. Not authority. Fear. It moved through him quickly, almost invisible. But I saw it. For years they had controlled the narrative. At family dinners. At gatherings. In quiet conversations behind my back. They turned my silence into guilt. My distance into disrespect. But now, I wasn't silent anymore. I stood up slowly, the chair behind me barely making a sound. There's a dinner next week, right? I asked. He didn't reply. But his expression confirmed it. My sister's pre-wedding family dinner. Of course. I nodded slightly, more to myself than to him. Good, I said. But suddenly, everything made sense. The timing. The pressure. The urgency. They didn't just need my signature. They needed my absence. And for the first time in 3 years, I was going to show up. The house felt different after he left. Not quieter. Clearer. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door he had walked out of. Like something invisible had finally been removed from the room. The envelope was still on the table. Untouched. Unmoved. Unclaimed. A few days later I walked into the restaurant where the dinner was being held. Warm lights. Polished glasses. Low conversations floating through the air like nothing had ever been wrong. My mother saw me first. Her smile froze. Just for a second. Then it returned, perfect practiced. "Ilara," she said like my name hadn't been missing from her voice for years. My sister sat beside her, dressed in soft white, glowing under the lights. She didn't smile. Not really. I took my seat. No one asked how I was. No one mentioned the silence. Dinner moved like a performance. Forks against plates. Quiet laughter. Small talk carefully placed over something fragile. Then, my mother cleared her throat. "We're so glad everything is settled," she said, glancing at me. There was the assumption, the control, the ending they had already written. I reached into my bag slowly and placed a folder on the table. Not thick, not dramatic, just enough. "What's that?" my sister asked, her voice tight. I looked at her, then at both of them. "Something you should have read before sending me anything," I said calmly. My father didn't touch it, but my sister did. Her fingers moved quickly at first, then slower, then, so. Silence spread across the table, heavier than before. "What is this?" my mother asked, her voice sharper now. I didn't rush my answer. "It's a notice," I said. "From my lawyer." That part was true now. I had taken my time. Made the call. Asked the right questions. Learned everything they thought I wouldn't. "The trust can't be altered," I continued. "And any attempt to pressure or misrepresent it becomes a legal issue." My sister's face had lost its color. My father finally reached for the paper. "Too late. They already know," I added softly. That was the shift. Not loud. Not explosive. Just final. For years they had shaped the story. Turned me into the difficult one. The distant one. The problem. But now, there was documentation. Clarity. Truth that didn't need to be argued. Because it was written. "I'm not taking anything from you," I said, my voice steady. "I'm just keeping what was already mine." No one laughed. No one smirked. No one corrected me. The room felt different now. Not warm. Not welcoming. Just honest. I stood up slowly, adjusting my coat. No anger. No raised voice. Just quiet. "I didn't cut you off for no reason," I said, looking at them one last time. "I just stopped accepting less than I deserved." No one stopped me as I walked away. No one followed. And for the first time in years, that silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like peace.